tangible animosity has existed since Bioshock was released, between those for whom it is revelatory and those of us who are old enough to have played System Shock 2 in 1999, although I first played through it in 2006, a year and a half before Bioshock was released. System Shock 2 fans aren't resentful of Bioshock because they necessarily dislike it or thought it was bad, but because it was released to near universal acclaim and continues to be paraded around by critics and some gamers as an example of gaming art, off the back of the Art Deco style and objectivist philosophy without enough recognition of its heritage. These System Shock 2 fans saw Bioshock for what it arguably was, a visually superior copy of System Shock 2, but with the depth cannibalized and filtered, the challenge nullified, within an unlikely and honestly somewhat gimmicky setting, and sprinkled with pop philosophy references to Ayn Rand's objectivism. Fine, pat on the head for naming a philosopher, have a brownie. Bioshock is set in the underwater dystopian city of Rapture, built in 1946, the brainchild of Andrew Ryan, who's evidently fed up filing for and paying taxes above ground. He starts out and remains an engaging character, but my interest in the story began to dwindle after his departure, as Frank Fontaine on inspection is no more dynamic a nemesis than a zealous terrorist or a power-mad general. Rapture's revolutionary history is interesting and better than Bioshock's in-game story, but neither are remotely as fascinating for me as the story of System Shock 2. While Bioshock explores social inequalities that can be studied throughout history, System Shock 2 explores possibilities of unknowns rather than retreads of lessons we've already learned, and retains believability by keeping the motivations of its human characters relatable and the setting for the game plausible. System Shock 2 examines the potential nature of artificial and alien intelligence, and their efforts to pervert and control humanity through parasitic infection and cybernetic implantation. The story we discover on our walks through the claustrophobic corridors of the Von Braun and the Rickenbacker is one of a gradual descent into chaos and loss of control for the ship's crew, followed by a chillingly told four-way power struggle between humans and the various corrupting influences. And it isn't just chilling because it's told well, using most of the same narrative tools as Bioshock, or because we spend much of the time fighting creepy, nearly human but not quite enemies, as in Bioshock, but because the game itself is challenging and therefore frightening and immersive. Bioshock was very easy. It's as if 2K wanted to appeal to a broad market and sell lots of copies, the swine. System Shock 2 is prohibitively difficult, with weapons that jam so frequently you could spread them on toast, but it enforces a nightmarish atmosphere and makes for a greater gaming experience. The difficulty I have with Bioshock's story is that I find it hard to relate to most of the human characters, many of whom are either insane or morally bankrupt. The game doesn't manage to suspend my disbelief even though it is visually compelling and weaves its narrative effectively, whereas System Shock 2 hangs together well within the web of logic it's created. All the parts ring true. The humans are painted as ordinary, identifiable souls trying to live out their day-to-day lives, but have their freedom to do so slowly, horrifically and uncontrollably ripped from them. The fact that they have mastered space flight and, through their audio logs, seem a competent bunch makes it all the more scary. Their descent into civil unrest, corruption and the ensuing chaos was convincing. System Shock 2 featured RPG elements and was probably the first notable game to merge them seamlessly within an FPS, although that in itself does not make it better than Bioshock's effort at including RPG tropes. What does make it better is that Bioshock made these elements simpler and more streamlined, severing the requirement for specialization and therefore diminishing the importance of choice. At an advanced stage in the game, all players are jacks of all trades, and masters of all trades too. This decimates the value of Bioshock's replayability, except to vary your answer to the ultimate moral choice question.
Sometimes I'm nice, and sometimes I'm nasty.
Yes, Bioshock gets the cookie for having a moral choice system, albeit a mostly pointless, vapid one. It would have been nice to have been granted an alternative System Shock 2 ending, in which you could team up with Shodan in exchange for cybernetic upgrades. But alas, such a perfect game would have rendered everybody instantly addicted and the world economy would have ground to a shuddering halt. Krampf. Where was I? RPG elements. System Shock 2 prefaces the game by outlining your training as a soldier, fighter, psionic, mage, or engineer, rogue. The balance is pretty good and skill point, cybernetic module, assignment feels important. I don't want to spoil either game and I don't want to make this video much longer. In short, Bioshock is impeccably presented, lavishly stylized with appropriately industrial Art Deco, very pretty but a bit dumb at its core despite some clever concealments. While System Shock 2 is ugly, but get over it, it's what's on the inside that counts. Lovely insides. Of course, there's high-resolution texture mods and a fix for widescreen support, if I can just get the game to work on Windows 7 64-bit. System Shock 1 from 1994 deserves some mention as the game that started it all, and struggled against graphical constraints to tell a good story, but that's all it's getting. I like Bioshock, it's better than the majority of first-person shooters, which isn't saying much. Bioshock 2 didn't exactly build on the ideas discussed in the first game, but Bioshock Infinite looks interesting. I'm glad Irrational Games have raised the franchise out from under the water. I award System Shock 2 a golden trophy filled with jelly babies, Smarties, and other yummy stuff. Bioshock gets the same trophy, but made of plastic, pasted with Art Deco pictures and filled with brown water, with a floating copy of Atlas Shrugged.
Look at you, hacker. A pathetic creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating as you run through my corridors. How can you challenge a perfect, immortal machine?